Well, today we're going to look at putting the regulator onto a portable oxygen tank. You can see here I've got two different size portable oxygen tanks that I'm going to be attaching a regulator to in order to operate them. Oxygen tanks come in many different sizes, so the one that you're putting your regulator on may look different than this one, may be taller or maybe even in a two-wheel cart. But the configuration or the way that we attach it to the neck of the tank and the way this regulator is will be the same no matter what size your tank is. So in order to put the regulator on the tank, a couple of things that you want to know about are what's on the neck of the tank here, and we've got two pins or two holes down at the bottom where these two pins of the regulator are going to sit. And that actually is a safety system so that only an oxygen regulator fits on an oxygen tank. And then the larger hole, that is where the oxygen comes out of the tank when we open up the valve on the top. So that's where the oxygen's coming out, and that's a very important part because of the amount of pressure that's in these tanks. We need to make sure that there is a washer that ends up sitting here and then sitting inside the regulator where the oxygen goes into the regulator. So that washer is a metal ring and it has a rubber grommet on the inside. So this is a permanent style washer, and we can go ahead and just put that on the regulator. It'll push on there and it should stay in place. That rubber grommet should hold it in place, and then we're ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and line it up so that these pins fit in the holes. So I'll hold it over the regulator or over the tank like this, and put the holes in the pins in the holes. I'm going to hold it, and then I'm going to tighten it down with the T-handle here, making sure I've got the regulator level sitting there. Snug it down, and I'm ready to go. So the next step is that I'm going to turn this nut on the top using the wrench. Now the only thing that might be a little bit different, rather than putting this on top of that nut, you might have a tank that has a toggle on it. And the toggle is just this piece of metal that's on the nut so that you can use that to turn the valve open. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and use the wrench, and I'll line that up here and put that in place. And what I'm going to do is turn it counterclockwise, and I'm going to open up the tank so that oxygen goes into the regulator. When I do, if you can see inside that gauge, it'll pop up, and this tank is filled to about 2,000 psi, so that's the pressure that shows up inside the regulator. So that's our gas gauge, so we know how much oxygen we have and how much time we've got on our tank, depending on what flow we set. So the next thing is to set the flow. So this flow is going to match your prescription that you have and you probably use on your oxygen concentrator. So what we're going to do is turn this on, and we're going to adjust it. Right now I've got it set at 2 liters per minute. And now I can go ahead and attach the cannula to that point. I'll go ahead and hook that up, and we're all ready to go. All right? So next thing I wanted to show you is, I talked about that washer just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is show you how to shut off the tank, and then show you what would happen if I didn't have a washer in place. So what I'm going to do is shut it off by turning it clockwise now, letting the pressure drain out of the tank, and then turning my flow gauge to off again, or 0. So let me just show you what would happen. I'm going to go ahead and turn that open. I'm going to take the washer out of the regulator. There's the washer, and I'm going to put that in. One of the things about these tanks that scares people is that sometimes if they leak, they make noise. They typically are not dangerous, really. You need to respect them and be careful, but they're not really dangerous. But they do make noise, and that's the scariest thing. So without a washer in there, if I open up this nut now. So if that ever happens to you, if you open up your tank and it hisses quite a bit like this, go ahead and just close it off again. And the first thing I would do is check with that nut closed, open up the regulator T-handle and look inside and see if you've got a washer. If you don't have a washer, of course, put one in. And if you do, take the washer out and inspect it. You may find that the rubber grommet is damaged or split or it's cracked or something, and then replace it with a good one. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back in, and we'll just run through it one more time. There's a good washer. And we'll put everything back in place and tighten this down. Open it up by turning this counterclockwise. And we'll go one time around. Set the flow. And we'll put this at 2 liters per minute. You can hear the oxygen coming out, but other than that, it's not leaking because we've got a good washer in there. So the next thing would be, what do we do when we're done? Well, when we're done with the tank, we want to always go back to the main valve. So whenever you're turning it on, you start there. When you're turning it off, you start here also. So go ahead and turn this off. And let the flow gauge, or the pressure gauge I should say, let that drop down to 0. When all the pressure is out, you can turn the flow gauge to off. And that's a good way to leave the tank sit. So if you're all done with the tank and you're going to use it again, go ahead and leave the regulator on, but it's off here. There's no pressure in the regulator, and the flow gauge is off. But if you're done, this is a good point to go ahead and take it off to put it on another tank if you need to.